Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're all very welcome to Castleblaney and to Íontas. We're delighted to be here this evening for the Castleblaney Drama Fest, who will be hosting the All-Ireland Confined Drama Finals. So you're all very welcome. Just before we start, we'll have a few words from the chairperson and chairman of the ADCI, John Travers, and then Pat McCabe is going to address you, and he's going to deal with a little bit about the work of the late Dermot Healy, who was a very good friend of Íontas and a very good friend of the amateur drama movement. So first of all, I'd like to call on John Travers to say a few words, chairperson of the Amateur Drama Council of Ireland.
Thank you, Joe. As chairperson of the Amateur Drama Council of Ireland, I'd like to welcome you all to the 2016 Confined All-Ireland Finals. I'd particularly like to welcome Noel Keelan, the Cathaoirleach of Monaghan County Council, Bernley Harton, the chairperson of the Drama League of Ireland, Mac Pollock from the AUDF, the Association of Ulster Drama Festivals, and Mary Pears from the International Association of the International Amateur Theatre Association. Normally, as a Donegal person, in recent years especially, our association with Monaghan is very much focused around Clonus in July and very tough contests. But the drama associations go back much further than that and are much more pleasant. To go back to 1968, now to go back with Ballyshannon to 1955, where Clonus won numerous awards at our drama festival. But 1968 we had a group came from Ballantrae, and everybody thought it was Ballantrae just down the road from Ballyshannon. McCardles weren't heard of at that stage. And they introduced us to Patrick Kavanagh with Terry Flynn, and then brought wonderful productions, King of Castle, Dust Disciples, way ahead of his time, Philadelphia, The Son of Man, The Just, Luther, and they spawned other groups. We later had Drumlin, and we had Castleblaney with memorable shows like Blue Remembered Hills and At the Black Pig's Dyke. Wonderful acting performances from Jim Lawler in Son of Man, Hugh O'Brien in Faith Healer, Maureen Kelleher in the Geely concert, and Michael Carling in the Black Pig's Dyke. Of course, you also associate Monaghan with Pat McCabe and The Butcher Boy and Breakfast on Pluto. But a couple of years ago there was a series which I found very interesting on RTE, the Play Next Door, where I think they were given a challenge to write a play in a month or a week or whatever it was. And Pat was one of the people involved. I think his play was the best of them. He drew on experiences. I'm not joking. he drew on his experiences of country and western music from Monaghan, which has recently been discovered within the Pale. The Troubles, life in border towns, and of course Ballyshannon could identify with that. Castleblaney, and one of the best moments in theatre for me at that was when he sang a duet, unaccompanied, with Big Tom, Gentle Mother. It was the camera, I think just one camera shot on them, and the two of them sang it completely naturally, and it was absolutely beautiful. When Castleblaney was proposed to host the All-Ireland Final, straight away we knew it was in safe hands. I've known Joe for a long time in the Ulster ADCI, and I knew that his team would bring together a fantastic All-Ireland Finals. Of course, they were well served by the theatre that they have here. It's not just a theatre, it's a multi-purpose theatre, which local authorities, the length and breadth of Ireland, north and south, would do well to visit and maybe use as a model, a multi-purpose facility. And John McCardle, who's here tonight, and Sister Celine, I think they were the sort of the inspirations behind that. There's something on in this building all of the time. So many activities, and I think it's a model as well worth looking at. I'd like to wish all the groups a Ballycogley, Dads, Skibbereen, Slay, Take Five, Confined, Laddamatti, Holy Cross, Ballycahill, and particularly the opening night group, Coolgrady, is always the most difficult for committee and for groups to go on the first night. So I wish them all the best of luck. All you can do is put on your best performance and hope at the end of the week the best performance wins. Thanks to all of the groups who participated in the festival circuit and all of the festival committees who organised those festivals. I was looking through the past records of All-Ireland finals, open finals, and found that an extraordinary number of the finalists have come from the Confined finals. You know, they started in Confined and moved up. The standard in Confined has got higher and higher. And I read out a few of the groups that have done that. Ballyduff, Palace, Corofin, Lifford, Cornmill, Charlestown, Bardick, Ballintrae, Letterkenny, Ennis, Shannon, Silken Thomas, Bridge, Kilmeen, Coolera, Kilmuckridge. That's only named a few. So you know the sort of standard you can expect to see this week, and you'll see those groups, many of them, moving up into the open section very soon. A fantastic fringe programme, if you look at your programmes during the week. It's not just a drama festival, there are activities for young and old, a huge variety, and that in Athlone and the Confined finals, the fringe events are now very much part of the festival week. It's a sort of celebration, and I think that you should encourage people who don't necessarily go to the drama, but look at the activities that are on, and they may well find something that suits them, because there's such a variety of activities during the week. Good luck to Anna Walker on an arduous but hopefully very enjoyable week. Thanks again to the sponsors, Bostic, the main sponsor, Monaghan County Council, and all of the other sponsors, the local sponsors, who support the festival year after year and have upped their sponsorship this year. I suppose the last ingredient in place is a large, appreciative audience. And Ballyshannon has competed here, and we know you get that here this week. So you have all the ingredients: a wonderful theatre, fringe events, adjudicator groups, an audience. So all you can do is just enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
Just before I call on Pat to introduce you to our adjudicator for this evening, Anna Walker. And just to John Travers's memory, Castleblaney was also one of those groups who moved up, having won the All-Ireland. I know. So finally, just to perform our official opening, I'd like to call on Pat McCabe. John has already outlined Pat's CV, kind of stole my thunder there a bit. But you all know Pat, you all know his reputation, and we all know that we in Monaghan are all very proud of producing yet again a wonderful writer and author. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to Pat McCabe.
Thank you very much for those kind words, Joe. I hope you don't consider it an impertinence on my part to use this wonderful opportunity to pay tribute to a person who passed away rather tragically over a year ago now. He was a great friend of the amateur drama movement. He was I think to call him an actor would be kind of an understatement. He was a star of some kind of a force of nature, I suppose, really you would call him one of his. Ed McQuillan, who's in the audience, was telling me one time they recruited him to play the part of a mendicant friar or something in the Ballintrae production of Luther, and I don't think he said anything. He just carried a bucket and shook it many times. Barry McDusky said, we have to give this guy something, and they gave him a prize, and nobody quite knew why, but any more than I suppose the adjudicators, when they found themselves confronted with the now legendary production of Waiting for Godot, I think it was 1979-80, with robust Cavan accents. I think they're kind of reeling from the shock yet. So I'd just like to, with your permission, take this opportunity to pay tribute to, well, Bob Dylan said when Hank Williams died, it was like a great tree falling. And that's kind of what I feel about Dermot's passing. And this is just called Wings Half a Crown. It's unlikely that the County Westmeath town of Finney in the year 1947 would have been considered a neo-Gallic orgiastic hotbed of concupiscence, philosophical expatiation, POV ingestion, and persistently riotous disputes of a theosophical and political nature. Or indeed celebrated for its tradition of late-night debates in jasmine-scented cafes and taverns regarding what Francis Stewart considered to be the absence of any countercurrent to the main shoddy stream of what passed for literature in these islands, tributaries of which were hailed every Sunday with dreary predictability according to Stewart and the literary supplements. No, the Midland Village's main claim to international fame at that time was the fact that it had made an appearance in a Percy French song, Come Back to Paddy Riley and Barry James Duff, in which a local bridge is accorded pride of place, quite inappropriately as it transpires. For the truth of the matter is that you can't turn left at the bridge of Finney. And if you happen to be wondering how I came privy to this extraordinary information, the answer is simple. Dermot Healy told me. You can't turn fucking left at the bridge of Finney, he says. No matter how you try it, it can't be done. I don't know for sure what Dermot was doing in those days, but I imagine him hanging around parish halls selling tickets and collecting bottles while gathering intelligence on the habits of various local breeds of birds and dogs, travelling through their inscrutable irises, as he would have put it himself. 1947 was the year he was born, the worst in living memory, or so they said, and never shut up saying as far as I can remember. When asses became sculptures of ice where they stood, and petrified hares uttered the 7 last words of Haydn before perishing. That last bit, as you probably have gathered, I made up. It reminds me of a technique that Dermot would somehow use when he would slyly permit his sentences to attain a certain jaunty, mesmeric rhythm which would then suddenly fracture, springing out of nowhere like a sally rod during a quiet walk in the woods, whipping lash you across you the face, and often as striking in their opulence as a Harry Clark stained glass window. And I always looked forward to encountering them with delicious anticipation. How did Dermot Healy, or someone like him, ever come out of Cavan? I was once asked by a famous film director. And found that I could supply no adequate response. Not readily, at any rate. I've always considered him, Seamus Heaney remarked in casual conversation, sui generis, really. And looking back on that period now, which has been alluded to by Joe already, the early 70s, as a younger man, Dermot, not much, but a little bit, was kind of significant in those times, that age, a kind of tenuous assault on the citadel of language had begun at that time. Although arguably it had been originally conceived by the poet Patrick Kavanagh in all his grumpy belligerence as a one-man war against the thoroughgoing English-bred lie of the Irish Renaissance. And the torch passed subsequently, certainly in my apprehension of things, to the great Tom McIntyre, who in his Faber short story collection Dance the Dance brazenly trapezed between Oblomov and O'Bruadar, and then to his Monaghan neighbour Eugene McCabe, whose colloquial obsessions continued along that same stretch of border. O land of sweet rolling hills and salty murderous milk churns, with their distinctive dum-dum projectiles of dialogue, most memorably in the story's heritage and cancer. Anyway, the next time I met Dermot, he'd just been arrested. And at that time, I remember, he looked a bit like Catweasel. Now, if anyone doesn't know who Catweasel was, he was the magician come medieval knight of the road who was so popular on television in the early 70s, and they'd taken him in to cool off for the night. At that time, my mother had got his name somewhere when he was editing the Drumlin. She wrote to him, "My son is good at the writing," she said. "Maybe you'd have room for one of his stories in your paper, would you?" And to this day, I've never got over the embarrassment. As a result of this communication, they started to arrive at the music sessions in the Creighton Hotel, at which his party piece was, "The hippity loaf fell off the dresser, where's that dog never where he's wanted?" I said to my mother, "Well, what did you think of Dermot's performance?" She said, "Well, I hope he's good at the writing because he can't sing a fucking He used to wear this silver tweed jacket, and you could see it in his photo of the Wolfhound Press collection, Paddy No More, in which he appears with many of his peers, Neil Jordan, Desmond Hogan, and so on. Such a name for a story collection. It reminds me of the best record, oh my God, just best forgotten, in which Dublin pop groups Orange Machine and Purple Pussycat would declare their mission safe, to make Ireland safe for rock and roll. Paddy is dead and the kids know it, that was called. Not that Dermot Healy could ever be called hip, certainly not with that tweed jacket, which was the kind of thing, especially when paired with a pair of raggy old Levi's blue jeans, that your mother would put on you if you happened to be going up the town. Because no more than Bob Dylan, the words current and contemporary meant little to Dermot Healy. He straddled epochs, instinctively comprehending both Puritan and Cavalier, corner boy and captain of industry. And nowhere is this more evident than in the pages of both of the Drumlin and Force 10, where the ordinary 5/8, as they used to be called, become as Falstaffian shadows, jaw-droppingly colossal against the sky of all time. Says Packy Clay to Joey Coyle, "Your man above, Packy, says he's going to the scaffold. Is that trapdoor safe?" He says, "You boy." Conversation, talk about gogarty. One night I laughed so much I covered the man in a mighty deluge of golden lager. Harp, as I recall, of which we drank plenty in those days. Once we were escorted out of a pub in Longford by the barman. It was the day of Live Aid. As our host at the time saw us tumbling out of the car, as she observed through gritted teeth, "This is the last straw, Healy." Not unexpectedly, we were given short shrift, perhaps because Dermot had already started talking to a bird. "Me man the chaffin," she said to the astonished host. I left him out the Granard Road that day, as no option remained but for the poet's thumb to be pressed into service. But he never made it, I discovered, having made his way back to the pub we were in, bewilderingly persuading the same barman to cash a cheque for £5 for the bus fare to Cavan. He said he'd be fucking famous, he told me later. He's going to frame it. And he wasn't joking, because it's still there in that Longford bar. I know because I've been back to have a look. Not long after his funeral, in fact. He was as good as a play, Flann O'Brien had written of the deceased Brandon Behan. And he will not be replaced in a hurry, or at all. For there has been no Irishman quite like him. Before continuing about Behan, I know it is probably only foolishness in my own head, but there are streets in Dublin which seem strangely silent tonight. I'm not suggesting that both writers have anything much in common, if anything at all. But that immediately came into my mind as I stood there admiring that neat and elegant signature on the cheque, with its capital D like a self-grooming, curtsying goose. Once in Brixton, Dermot said to me, "You're always walking, and you're always talking." He said to me, "Do you think Luke Kelly would record that?" I said. And proceeded to subject me to the worst 3 minutes of torture ever inflicted on a human being. He lit another carols and his face contorted into that familiar catwheel smile. "I would fucking buck you then," I heard him say, before vanishing to talk to a Scottish communist about budgies. Much is made these days, and rightly so, of the affection Irish people nurture for their poets and writers. And you can't catch a plane without the passenger next to you marvelling at how exceptional all of this is, and how no other country, large or small, could consider itself so unique and fortunate in this regard. But to be honest, when I was a young chap going around the place, writers were almost universally regarded as fruit and nutcases. Among the untamed souls I have in mind are Patrick Kavanagh. The Bowsy was at it again on the bus to Dublin, I remember a man saying, giving guff to the driver. And Brendan Behan, I seen him hitting a policeman a box outside Miss McDade's. And it has to be admitted that intermittently, at least during our travels over the years, myself and Dr. Healy did little to disabuse the Irish populace of this traditional perception. I am thinking particularly of what might be considered a performance piece involving a black leather coat draped a la the old woman of the roads over the head of the celebrated author as giddy ululations shrilly protested, "Moo, moo, I'm a cow," were heard to rend the startled air. And I'm also delighted to report that there were on occasion certainly literary disputes, often in Brady's of Brixton High Road. Is writing worth anything? I don't know. But no journalist ever chronicled policemen, postmen and bachelors and damaged drinkers with such gigantic league-stepping inner lives, whether in the dramatic flatlands where the honeysuckle blooms or the wild elemental slopes of the west. I don't want to delay you too much, so I just conclude this little tribute by saying that I went back recently to the Granard Road and after to the White Horse Hotel in Coothill, where we'd read many years ago for another arts festival. It was all boarded up, but there was enough energy remaining to take me back to that Sunday afternoon when an old priest had shaken the life out of his newspaper on foot of a recital of a wop bop a loo bop a wop bam boom by our two daughters and Dermot. Dermot had called them the two sad poets. Only a Woman's Heart, the all-female folk sensation, had been popular at the time. Now I don't know whether it's true or not that only a woman's heart can know, but I do know this, that in the words of Harold Pinter, Ireland wasn't golden always, but it was golden sometimes. And in Coothill that year it surely was. With Footsbarn Theatre Company cartwheeling and carousing, and the maestro at the height of his powers, as the also great Pete Ward gave me a box in the back of the head and said, "McCabe, you're fading, and it's only 3 a.m. I stood there a while by the side of the old five-bar gate in the very same place that I left Dermot that day. Maybe there was a moorhen, a waxwing, a startled rabbit, or a party of geese like gentlemen and ladies at a wedding, I don't know. Like I say, I don't notice these things. But I do sometimes hear things, and as a melody drifted from a nearby open window, it was hard not to construe it as a kind of oral Macondo River from Marquez's stories, creating all sorts of memories as it passed, making its way under a bridge which, in the style of its Fenea counterpart, could never have existed except within the realm of magic and false memory. Two phantom figures made their way along the riverbank, murmuring genially after the fashion of elderly clerics, chatting as such men do of superior breeds in the sprinting world, along that worn and winding track, before pausing where the children from Shell Corner, yes, that's what Dermot and Helen's multicultural troupe of ecstatic apprentice goose herders all the way from the College of Wonders, their children and extended family, had taken upon themselves the trouble of erecting a sturdy little wooden stand that they called Shell Corner, upon which they have placed the most beautiful pair of feathered appendages, all perfectly pressed and ironed in my imagination. "Healy's wings," I heard them peal excitedly. "Healy's wings, now going cheap, only 2 and 6. And maybe like Flann O'Brien, it was just another episode of that same disconsolate foolishness, because I suppose in all truthfulness it could be anything else. But on a recent visit to Longford Town, I sat in Eamon McKiernan's bar, and as I looked northwards towards Granard, I couldn't keep from thinking of those midland heavens open up, not with rain or the slightest hint of some natural catastrophe, But just another heave, just one last heave of those wicked heaving shoulders, as Dermot stooped down to give me one thing I would treasure for the rest of my living days, a final, combative, affectionate catweasel smile. Thank you. So remiss of me, the most important thing of the evening, it's fallen to me my official duties here tonight before I get carried away, is to happily declare this wonderful festival open. So may you all have a wonderful, wonderful day. So good luck, everyone.
No one but a close friend of Dermot Healy could have captured the character and the qualities of one of our finest writers. Thank you, Pat. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's down to the business of the evening. So